Hi there, I've had some queries about TMA04, so I thought I'd just post a little video to answer them in case anybody else has the same questions. So the first one is about transparency. So transparency is something that you might not have come across before. So just want to start by saying that TMA04 is a qualitative research project. So that means it's not an experiment and it's not scientific. So qualitative research values subjectivity, so it's a really different epistemology, which means that it comes from a different knowledge base, and a way of gathering knowledge and information is a little bit different, or in fact vastly different. So we value subjectivity, and that's where transparency comes in. So if you look in I think it's week 26, correct me if I'm wrong, in the post, week 26 talks about, gives you the method, and it says that you need to be transparent. What transparency means, it's not, don't worry too much about it, it's just about being really clear and explicit about how you've arrived at the themes you've arrived at, and that part of that will mean explaining very clearly how you did the method. So the method section is about being clear about that, and it's also about being clear about your lens as a researcher, so saying something about who you are. So a little section on reflexivity, for example, I'm a white, I guess middle class woman living in Britain, and I have experience of or I could relate to this person in this way, or so reflexivity, it depends what you're talking about. So if I were doing a project on Brexit, which I have, then I would talk about the way I voted and how sometimes it was difficult to remain impartial when hearing views that I didn't agree with, or that actually I found the process quite enlightening because I realised that my views changed as I went through the process of analysing the data. Or if I were doing a project on sexuality, I might explain my own sexual orientation and perhaps my own experience of bias or prejudice in that way. So it's about positioning ourselves so that the reader can interpret, can make their own interpretations about how you've interpreted the data. So I had a question about, do we have to use SPSS? It was a clarification, just checking we don't have to use SPSS. Absolutely not, because this is qualitative data, not quantitative data. So there are no numbers here apart from line numbers. Line numbers are really useful because if you append a transcript, then it means that people can refer back to the line that you're referring to, that you are discussing, and they can have a look at the broader context. Which brings me on to appendices. So I had a question about appendices. So I'm going to post a link to an APA formatting guide for appendices, excuse me, which you can follow. But essentially it's you want to start each new appendix on a new page. So don't just have them all kind of linked together in one page. Each appendix needs to start on a new one. And actually just so the appendix, I believe, is I think it's a Latin word. I think it's a Latin word. I was going to say, is it Greek or Latin? But I think it's Latin. And so the singular, one appendix is one appendix, like you've got an appendix in the body, and two or more appendices. So that's I know that can be a little bit confusing, like a bit like hypothesis and hypotheses, and that sounds more Greek. Not that I'm an expert. So anyway, so yeah, your appendices, plural, should be at the end of the document and starting each new one. Please do include some examples of your coding, the different coding processes that you go through. So you might want to start off with an example, and you can take a photo or a screenshot, so depending on how you did it. So if you want to take a photo because you've highlighted stuff like I've got maybe, yeah, so this is just something that's sort of highlighting here, and you might have, you know, code words, say like, oh yeah, I've got morality here. So you might sort of start using keywords, you know, like to code, and you might be kind of highlighting sections like that. You could just take a photo of that with your phone and paste it in. Alternatively, you might be somebody who uses a computer to highlight. I like to use different colours when I'm doing it. But yeah, so if you use a computer, then simply just paste from one Word document into another where you've done the coding. Either is absolutely fine, but that should go in your appendices. So you should have an appendix for your coding. And you should also include a thematic map or a table. So make sure that in the results section you include a table that shows the themes and any sub-themes that you've got. So you want to make sure that your themes are nice and coherent. And so what does this word coherent means? It means that the theme tells a story, that it sticks together, that you're not trying to encompass too many different things. Now, one of the things with coding qualitative data is that you can often think that you've got a theme really quickly, and as you're reading it, you might think, oh, there's a theme there. But I'm just telling you from experience that it's worthwhile holding off rather, and trying to just stick to code words, because what you find is the more you read, and I would say you need to read the transcript at least 5 times. It's an iterative process, which means you need to go over it and over it again. And this has happened to me in data. I think, oh, there's a theme there, and then basically you've done it too quickly. It's like kind of a bit premature synthesis, really. So you need to really read through, and then a theme, you'll start to see. It's a bit like a magic eye picture. You need to give it the time and the patience to sit down and look at it, and to see how your mind interprets the themes in a very coherent way. So there should be a narrative there, and that's probably one of the things that people find trickiest. So I just want to say that analysing this data is not a quick thing. Qualitative is a bit more of a slow burn. So give yourself time, maybe shorter periods of time to read it, familiarise yourself, and then come away and just let it mulch in the mind, as it were. Just let it percolate through the mind, and then come back to it again and have another read. And somehow there's just some magical process that, for me anyway, and other qualitative researchers that I know, that just sort of happens where it's almost like the themes pop out. And that's not themes emerging, because the themes are definitely your interpretation, and that's why transparency is important. Just saying how you arrived at the themes you did, and how you analyse the data, so that anyone reading can see exactly the process that you've been through. So I hope that that's helpful. Just a few little tips based on the questions that I've had, and the good news is no SPSS. And also, actually, just to say one more thing, there's no right or wrong in qualitative research in terms of the themes that you interpret. Now, you could analyse the data in a way and come with different themes than somebody else, and that is totally normal, but that's why we need to explain how we've come by that process, and need to explain it. You do need to provide evidence, though, just like when you're writing a lab report. So this is a different type of report, because it's not a laboratory experiment. But you do need to provide evidence in the form of quotes, and it's about having that balance of illustrative quotes that support the claims you're making about the story that's being told, but also doing sufficient analysis. So not having too much of you kind of describing without any evidence to back up the claims you're making, but also not having just quote after quote. And it's a good idea to not list quotes as well. So maybe you'll have 1 or 2 together, but don't let the quotes, the illustrative excerpts from the transcript, speak for themselves. You need to unpack them, so don't rely on the reader to do that interpretation. Another aspect of transparency is you explaining how you're interpreting what the interviewer is saying. So I really hope that that's helpful, and I'm sure that you'll get lots more help for TMA04 from the tutorials that you're going to have. But that's just for any of you who, because I've had an email asking some questions, so that's just for any of you who are already thinking about TMA04 and just want some guidance on when to get started.